recently you may notice in the news there's more and more talk of possibly World War III coming, which has always been something probably mentioned, especially during the Cold War era. And so it goes on in waves. But it is interesting to note that sometimes talking to people in the street, how people's anxiety is kind of increasing over the possible prospect of a great war. And the war minister of the European Union last month or so had said Europe needs to prepare for the possibility of war. And so I think about 8 or 10 countries have reinstated conscription, which for some of them wasn't too something of history, too much of something of their history. Some of them had only gotten rid of it, 15, 20, 25 years ago. But so it seems like things are kicking into gear and people are getting more and more worried. And yet there is a great war that has already been raging and has killed more humans than all other wars combined in human history. And that is the war on unborn children. In all of human history, all those thousands of years that we can estimate how many people have died in war, conservative estimate would be about 500 million have died. And a more generous estimate, 1 billion. So some say somewhere in between is a good number, 700 million. But let's go with the generous estimate. 1 billion people have died in all of wars throughout human history. Since 1980, after Roe v. Wade had caused kind of a worldwide revolution, at least around 2.5 billion babies have been killed in the womb. So since 1980, more babies, more innocent lives have been taken than in all wars combined throughout human history. And this is the war then that we especially need to be praying for and making reparation for and seeking to end. This is the war that we need to pray that there comes peace. Because in this, there will be God's reckoning. His judgment will come. For the cries of the innocent will be heard. And that is why we, especially today in our country, continue to pray, even though we've had a great victory with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. There is still much killing of these innocent lives taking place. There's still, in many states, even more now, availability, even though in about 10 or a dozen states there has been a ban in effect. Other states have allowed even more. And even in my home state of Florida, there's still more protection for the egg of an eagle than the life of an unborn child. And this then is important to keep working towards in our civil atmosphere, the public square. We need to keep fighting for the lives of those who cannot speak and continue to pray. And that's why our bishops have declared today a day of prayer and penance for the protection, the legal protection of unborn children. And our nation is not alone in this killing of innocent lives, but it is going to have to take responsibility for the lives that have been lost. St. Faustina, in her diary, had talked about how she experienced great pains, great suffering in reparation for the sin of abortion. And she was also told that there was a great chastisement coming upon her beloved city of Warsaw. There was a great sin that was taking place, and it was her reparation, her atonement for sin, appealing to the mercy of God that was holding it back. And less than just a couple years after she died, World War II breaks out, and Warsaw is one of the most destroyed cities in the whole war. 95% of it just flattened, destroyed. And so what was that great sin that was taking place, that was calling for this chastisement? Father Seraphim, the vice postulator for the cause of the canonization of St. Faustina, said that St. Faustina's confessor, Father Sopoćko, later discovered that between the First and Second World Wars, the city of Warsaw, which as the capital of Poland, was also one of the great capitals of abortion in the world. While St. Faustina lived and prayed, that city was spared. But hardly a year after her death, Poland was invaded, and by the time the war was over, Warsaw was almost completely destroyed, much like Sodom and Gomorrah. We can hold back this divine wrath, though, with our prayers and our penance, with the praying for the conversion of the hearts of those who promote such an atrocious deed. And we especially appeal to the mercy of the Lord, for the sin of abortion, no matter how great it is, and it's even grounds for excommunication from the Catholic Church for participating or assisting in one, even with how great a sin this sin is, it is still but just a drop in the ocean of the Lord's mercy. And so that is why we continue to plead to the mercy of the Lord for the end of abortion and for the conversion of all the hearts that are involved with it. But even more important than praying for laws to protect the unborn children, we need to have a shift in our culture. We need to have a shift in our desires, because the war against abortion will not end until we also end our lust, until we also end our contraceptive mentality. And so much of the increase of abortion in this past century has also rooted in the increase of contraception. And so for Catholics who say they are pro-life and are using contraception, they are actually working against the pro-life cause. They are supporting that very pro-death environment and mentality that has become the norm in today's world. We have returned to the ancient paganism, even though we think we have progressed as a society. We have returned to the ancient pagan morality, which allowed for the use of contraception and many other acts that were perverse and disordered because of the lust that had taken over people's hearts. And so until we get back and protect the marital act and root out all sins of lust and their perverse other ways of sinning against the marital act. Abortion will always just be the ultimate end result. And so the Catholic Church is the only church still holding firm on contraception. The Anglican Church was one of the first non-Catholic Christian churches to allow it back in 1930. And even C.S. Lewis, a great Anglican author, recognized that this was only going to be the beginning of something very perverse. He recognized that making contraception permissible removed the most basic impulse of chivalry that would cause reasonably decent men to refrain from relations out of concern for causing an unwanted pregnancy. And it also, he said, removed the most basic impulse of prudence that caused most reasonably decent women to refrain from relations if they didn't want to get pregnant. And so this decency has completely left because of this snowball effect that started with allowing contraception for grave reasons. And eventually, pretty much all the other Protestant churches, even some of the Orthodox churches, will allow it for certain cases or just completely freely. But this mentality that comes about with the use of contraception is a rejection of life. It's a rejection of the openness to life. And so if contraception rejects that fertility, that act of being open to the creation of life in advance, it will lead to abortion, which rejects the child after conception. Contraception says, not now, and it just leads to abortion, which says, not ever. Contraception separates the marital act from procreation, which leads to abortion, just erasing procreation entirely. And contraception asserts autonomy over fertility, over the creation of life, which leads to abortion asserting autonomy over life itself. And yet we are not God. We are not the author of life, but yet we are given that great and majestic dignity to participate in that creation of life. And yet, whether it's with contraception or abortion, we reject that great and awesome moment that takes place in the creation of life. And so the selfishness that comes about in the use of contraception will only lead to the selfishness that comes about in the use of abortion. And St. Mother Teresa put it well that, it's a poverty that a child must die so that a mother may live as she please. There are many circumstances in which it's certainly not easy. Women don't want to have an abortion. And yet, if there is a difficult circumstance, if there is a situation in which sometimes all it is just a lack of financial concern, or a financial concern, or just concern of being able to take care of the other children already that have been had, it stems then in a lack of trust. Whatever concern is at hand, the Lord has brought that life into existence at the conception of that child. And the Lord who gives that child every moment its breath as a gift of love, He will provide, and He will provide for its mother to take care of that child as well. And it is the same then in the contraceptive mentality that has completely taken over. so much of it stems from a lack of trust, not trusting in the mercy of God to provide. The Lord is merciful, and He will take care of whatever is needed. Give completely yourself, surrender yourself to the Lord by praying, Jesus, I trust in you. And the Lord will have everything needed provided. And that is why it is so important so Catholics can build a culture of life. It begins with also fostering chastity within one's life and passing on that chastity within the home. And it's important then as a culture, as a whole, to grow in chastity, to uproot from our society all sins that attack the marital act in its natural format. And so, sins even within oneself, self-abuse or the use of pornography, even that is something that is leading ultimately to this mentality that abortion is needed. All those that say they are pro-life then need to ask the Lord and the Blessed Virgin Mary and the saints to intercede and help them grow in chastity so that we may respect the marital act and not separate it from its procreative side and seeking to just want it in its pleasurable side. And the morning after pill, which is definitely an abortifacient, is not only the major concern as well, but even the pill itself. If it's stopping a fertilized egg from implanting, that's an abortion. And so even practicing Catholics that are using the pill have participated in that. They need to bring that to the Lord in His mercy in confession. The Lord desires to bring us mercy. The Lord desires to give us life. But we also need to live our lives then that is open to life completely. As the Lord said, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me." So what does that mean then when we reject the child the Lord had in store for us? We reject the Lord. We reject Jesus. And that beautiful passage of Jesus, though, searching the lost sheep, the one that went astray, leaving behind the 99. Sometimes we forget that this is in reference to the little children, that it is not the will of our Heavenly Father that one of these little ones be lost. Yes, we may be that stray sheep that the Lord calls us back to, and when we go to confession, He is certainly delighted when we have been found. But it is especially the little ones, the innocent, who have no other sin other than original sin, that the Lord desires not to be lost. So may we do everything in our part in the living of our lives with virtues, especially the virtue of chastity, to promote this culture of life and continue then to pray and partake in penance like St. Faustina did for the reparation of the sin of abortion, so that this great sin may come to an end as soon as possible, that there may be peace in the world, but especially peace in the wombs of mothers, those who have been given great vocation to nurture and care for life. May the Blessed Virgin Mary and St. Joseph and all the saints intercede for us, that life may be preserved, protected, cherished, and loved.